The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We've got a great conversation for you coming up. But first, before we do, just want to let you know that this episode is presented by the Lighting Controls Association as well as Light Fair. Hopefully, we'll see you guys there. It's going to be a really great show. It's going to be in Vegas this time, so hopefully you got your tickets booked and you're looking at going down there. But at any rate, also it is financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com, where we've got all of our episodes, a news feed, a merch store, training opportunities, as well as our Council on Lighting Control Startup and Integration. And additionally, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We could not do this without your support. Tondo is supporting this. You're going to learn a lot about them in just a moment because they are also our guest on this episode. But check them out. Tondo, TONDO-IoT.com. That's their website. They're a great smart city lighting solution. They really have some excellent products, really worth your time to check them out. But again, hopefully you're going to learn a lot about them in this episode because they really have a lot to talk about. So let's get into the conversation here with Marissa. Marissa, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Webster, and thanks for having me here today. Um, who am I? I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Tondo Smart, and my background comes primarily from the IT world. Um, this is year number 42 for me in the industry.
Wow.
Started when I was 17 years old, so that tells you how old I am. But yeah, and this has by far been the most interesting and enjoyable experience of my career, and that's saying a lot. I think I've had some pretty diverse experiences, but Tondo has been the most fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Joining me. Unfortunately, Ron's sick today, so he won't be a voice on this podcast. But thanks for joining us and sponsoring this episode. And so, with Tondo, I mean, I fortunately got a chance to talk with you about this company before this podcast recording. But just for people who are unfamiliar with Tondo, do you mind just telling us the quick elevator pitch of what it is that you do?
Yeah, well, essentially, we make smart lighting controls for roadway and outdoor area lighting, and we have a cloud-based platform for managing that. But in addition to that, we've built a controller that allows the connection of a variety of sensors and other connected devices. So we're really not just lighting, but more of a smart city platform.
Mhm. Yeah.
And Tondo's, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah. So basically, smart cities. So for people who are listening who may have heard that buzz term before, do you mind just
Yeah,
explaining that a little bit more?
yeah. Specifically, what I mean is we're talking about connected infrastructure. And so wherever a sensor has to monitor infrastructure health, the environment. It could be anything from a flood area, which is something that we've done in a project, to obviously lighting, but it could be controlling gates. It could be checking for groundwater pollution. Obviously, air quality, we've seen some of that. Anything
Mhm.
that can be switched on, off, or anywhere in between, we can control.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the focus when it comes to lighting, especially because of the fact that you have power running to the light fixture anyways, and lighting needs to kind of be pretty much ubiquitous in a lot of cases with urban environments, it just makes sense to kind of attach to that resource for these kinds of applications.
It does, although, we don't want to take power to the pole for granted. In many
Mm,
cities, that's not a 24/7 connection. That's a dusk to dawn connection. And so
right.
where you've got cabinet controlled lighting, of course, and I'm preaching to the knowledgeable here, um, we have to take that from a dusk to dawn to a 24/7
Mhm.
situation. And that's one of the things our controls enable.
And so, how does that exactly work if you have a dusk to dawn system that you're trying to upgrade and enable to this 24 hours system?
Well, good question. With the advent of LED retrofits and the movement from analog to digital, you know, um, nothing new to the audience here. That gave us the ability to uh, do digital control as opposed to analog
Mm,
control. And back in as it primarily or initially in Europe, DALI 2 emerged as a open and now global standard.
mhm,
Kind of that was originally initially dominated by the Philips SR system, and then DALI D4i came along soon
mhm,
afterwards and gave us sensor standard control. um, we saw that opportunity to build a controller where you plug into that empty
mhm.
socket that's on top of most LEDs, not all of them.
Yeah.
I have run into situations where customers have purposely ordered fixtures without sockets.
Hmm.
An interesting
Interesting.
decision.
Yeah.
But that empty socket is, I tell people it's the most valuable real estate in your city on
Mm,
a square footage basis. What you can do with that socket is not just lighting control, but it opens the world up to that connected infrastructure. And it's simple plug, twist, lock. With all the technology we have now, we can automatically activate and provision that securely. There's
mhm.
nothing for anybody at the top of pole to do other than look at their smartphone and go, oh, there's a green light. Okay, I'm down the pole again.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, part of this infrastructure does require some level of connectivity. You
Yeah.
know, what about those cases where you don't have those sockets on the fixtures?
Well, interestingly enough, so we've done on-pole version of our
Mhm,
controller. So in the city of Jerusalem, and Tondo is originally a Tel Aviv-based company,
mm,
and I'm leading their market entry here in the US and Canada. But in Jerusalem, all of our controllers were internal to the pole because they had decorative fixtures in the
mm.
old city, and you don't want to disrupt the aesthetic. And we've recently received a US patent on that control that
Nice.
flush mounts to the fixture itself. So you can actually, instead of having a socket, you have our controller sitting flush mount to the top, and you still get that. The problem doing that is the connectivity. When you
Right.
flush mount it, you have signal issues. And we were able in Jerusalem to get signals not only out of the pool, but with our new patented controller, we can get that GPS and Bluetooth and cellular out of the
Oh,
controller
wow.
itself on the top. Yeah.
So I mean, really, you're leveraging a lot of different data points, not just for the communication bus line between the fixtures, but also to kind of leverage additional, because you were talking about like IoT type data and additional metrics that you guys monitor. So you have a software platform that
We
collects all
do.
this data, and what
Yeah.
can you
And
do with that?
well, can I tell you a little bit of a story behind
Yeah,
that? Because it's one of my
please
favorite
do.
things to talk about. I'm going to just, it's tangential, but it makes sense. So originally, the Tondo platform wasn't made for lighting. It was originally
Mm,
made for industrial IoT. And our CTO and his company had a bunch of customers like PepsiCo and Varta batteries and a bunch of
huh,
others, from agriculture to now medical to a bunch of other companies, um, doing industrial IoT applications. And Tondo was a customer. So
mm,
Tondo subcontracted a lot of the early design work
mm,
to our CTO Eliav and his company. And that platform was device agnostic in a sense that, or solution agnostic in the sense that we
mhm.
didn't care what we were controlling. We just wanted to control everything, like, control the world.
Yeah.
Um, and it's yes, it's our plan to take over the world. Um, and and but but when he built that, he built a bunch of things in just thinking about what if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if somebody asks for this. And so he built this primarily on top of open source technology and a built-in, baked-in artificial intelligence platform. He built what is now called Tondo Cloud IQ. And we
Mhm.
ended up just saying, hey, uh, let's just acquire you. So we bought him and his company and his team, and brought everything in house, um,
Interesting.
and it just made sense for us to get that talent and that technology and a bunch of patent library too.
Mhm.
But yes, we have that control and that platform that can control lights as well as.
It's interesting to hear of that because every now and then we run into people who talk about software that was originally generated for something else being applied to lighting, and I think one of the things that I'm sure listeners are asking is like, okay, so what is it like being an IoT platform that's designed for something completely different, controlling lighting? Is it quick? Is it efficient? Is it, does it respond immediately to my commands?
Or in short, what do you guys know about lighting anyway? Right?
Right, right.
What do you latecomers, carpetbaggers coming in and think you know something about lighting? Um,
Totally.
well, one of the two founders of the reason Tondo itself was founded, separate from Eliav, our CTO's company, was one of the founders, Mika Ben Ezra, was like a 40-year veteran of the lighting industry, owned his own lighting company, did a bunch of work with utility electrical grid stuff,
Hmm.
and so had this wealth of knowledge around lighting. And it was his idea, together with our CEO Guy Sadi, who's the uh, got a digital communications background and accounting background, so it made sense. He knows how
Yeah.
to keep budgets on track and spend people's money properly. And but it was me, yeah, right, exactly. Investors like that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Uh, but it was Mika who had the idea of lighting control, and so it was his idea to take his wealth of knowledge and say, you know what, I think we can do this stuff better. And this platform, Eliav, is brilliant, and I think we can marry those two things together.
That's great. I mean, I think that really is a necessary component, having an experienced person kind of helping that migration because, you know, like you said, there's so many people that come in and it's like, what do you know about lighting? Like, why are you trying to get into this industry? And so having that really supports that goal. And additionally, so I mean, ultimately the drive of Tondo was this idea of smart lighting using this kind of platform, which is phenomenal. And so, from that perspective, with this sort of additional data that you're collecting, what is the experience for the end user using this platform?
Well, if it was just limited to lighting, it's not a huge problem to solve. There are some complexities, and I'll get
Hmm.
into that. If you ask me another question, I can talk to you
Sure.
about that. But we're not just talking about lighting, are we? We're really talking, like, when you start to open up your scope to everything that is smart city, a
Hmm.
city with, say, 5,000 streetlights. It was lighting as the platform for smart city connectivity. And if there's any doubt about that, I can give you my opinion. But
Sure.
but but you could be looking at 5 to 10 times the number of streetlights in
Hmm.
sensors deployed over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right.
And so now you have to start thinking about a scale and
Hmm.
technologies, and how do you not run into a brick wall
Right.
after the lighting's all done and it's all working,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and
and
sometimes a literal brick wall that prevents you from communicating.
right, like we've heard that cities have had new buildings go up, and all of a sudden the cell access disappears, right? And
Right.
so one of the things we've done, because you're going to find those disappearing spots, or if you have a cell tower go out and it's a dead spot in your network, what do you do? And so we
Hmm.
married Bluetooth mesh into the design. So we've got both cellular
Mm,
on every controller plus Bluetooth mesh on every controller. And so we can do some interesting things with packet writing and load balancing and a bunch of technical stuff that cities shouldn't have to care about and don't with us because we manage all of that.
sure. Well, and I think that's interesting. I mean, there's a couple of things there that you talked about. I guess the first thing here is the redundancy of communication is really critical because of the fact that you're dealing with these unknowns, and so you're marrying Bluetooth mesh and cellular data to be able to kind of navigate a changing environment. An urban environment changes very quickly, depending on how the urban design is working, and sometimes you're not privy to exactly how big, how thick, how robust a building's going to go up, and then suddenly it's like, oh, my communication line's down. So having that redundancy really makes a lot of sense. Additionally, with this sort of approach to navigating the languages, you really are kind of addressing another concern that people have, which is like, well, Bluetooth mesh isn't secure, or how do I make sure that everything's like safe from being hacked or something. So like, I would imagine that also plays into it, and that's why you were just saying you manage the data on your end so that the cities don't have to, which is a thing that also we run into. A lot of groups will say, well, we provide the data, but we don't actually manage the data for you. You gotta figure that out on your own end.
Well, and coming from an IT background, I know how complicated that can be. If you,
Mhm.
there's one call with a large city in Canada that I had a few months back, and they were talking about IP addresses and routing, and I'm like, why, why do you have to have that conversation? That's not your problem. Should be your problem. But they had a different solution in place that they've been trying to get to work and had to replace
Mhm.
things like gateways and there's all these pieces, and it's like the word gateway and router and IP address shouldn't enter into the vocabulary.
That's
um,
a really interesting
but
thing. I just want to tap on that for a second because our previous guest Shoshana was just talking about stuff like that, where it's like, I'm a lighting designer. I don't need to know, like, this is somebody else's job. I'm about pretty pictures and stuff, and somebody else should be doing this work. And so it's really interesting to hear you kind of bringing from the other end of that conversation of like, yeah, we do that. Like, you shouldn't worry about that.
we have this really complex back end, but you never see it. You get
Hmm.
what you get from a customer perspective is you get to see like the energy metering in real time, and you get to see,
Hmm.
the status in real time and all the things you need for your operations in, we'll call it near real time if you want to be 100% accurate, um, but you're not going to be dealing with, oh, like I have to provision this device or I have to manage security certificates or I need to deal with, you know, um, no, you don't even have to manage a cell phone plan. We cover all of that for you
Oh,
because we like to have multiple cell providers for redundancy. And so we've actually got two or three plans active at any given time.
wow.
So if one goes, oh, it fails over to the other, and there's a bunch of complex technology that again you don't have to worry about.
Right. So I mean, I'm guessing there's a subscription for this because I mean, you can't just get that for free. I'm guessing.
Yeah, the way that people can buy this stuff is fairly straightforward. I mean, there's a cost. This traditional method would be cost per controller, and then
Hmm.
a cost per uh, month, if you will, a low
Sure.
cost per month for every controller or sensor that gets added to the network. That's how we make our
Mm.
money.
No, and I
And
think that makes sense.
yeah, the important thing to understand, though, is that, and one of the innovations I think that Tondo's brought, not from the technology side, but also to the business model of smart lighting, is making the project cash flow positive. And
Mm.
and that's been a huge barrier of entry, I think, for a lot of cities, because up until now, when you run the numbers, they're cash flow negative
Hmm.
on smart lighting projects. So it's no surprise that unless you've bundled it in with an LED retrofit and hidden that extra cost, you're going to be underwater.
Hmm.
What city, unless it's a public safety issue, what city is going to want to be underwater on the project?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that that is an argument that gets thrown out a lot from city officials. It's like, well, it's really expensive to upgrade to a smart city solution.
Right. And what we've done is we've done some stuff with that baked in artificial intelligence that Eliev so brilliantly decided to throw in the base infrastructure,
Hmm.
um, to automate the complexity of applying dimming according to RP8 standards, ANSI
Mm.
IES RP8. It there's a huge complexity problem because I know a lot of vendors have talked about dimming this and dimming that, and you can have a profile set up and you can do this, and you can have like your lighting curve. Yes, you could, but here's how the math works. Let me
Yeah.
digress into math teacher mode. If you have, oh, let's even say a dozen different fixture models with half a
Mhm.
dozen different luminance and a few different poles and a bunch of different roadway classifications, and you've got a dynamic pedestrian cyclist traffic out there. That's combinatorial math. When you do the this
Mhm.
times that times that, you end up with hundreds or thousands of different lighting profiles to manage to ANSI standard. And that's why
Right.
nobody's been doing it. And if you don't manage standard, guess what? It's not necessarily safe lighting, which is the whole point
Right.
of lighting in the first place. Make it safe.
Right.
Um, it's only doable with AI because AI is specifically designed, certain
Mm.
types of AI are specifically designed to deal with complexity, right? And so you can throw, and we have a very universal AI, so it can look at a bunch of different problems. We can throw AI at the ANSI standard and say, okay, the goal is to
Mm.
get the right amount of lighting on the pavement for the pavement surface for the roadway classification. We'll put sensors out to monitor pedestrian and cyclist traffic because that's dynamic. The roadway classification generally takes care of the street traffic, so we don't have to monitor
Mm.
cars or trucks or whatever. But
Right.
it takes that and it just makes mincemeat out of the complexity problem and says, okay, we'll take
Mm.
care of that for you.
Interesting.
And
So
that's where
what?
the project changes to cash flow positive because now you can cut your
Mm.
lighting levels by about 40 to 50% in a
Right.
typical city and
That's
still be
that's
safe.
right. Well, that's the thing that I'm hearing a lot of people tapping on my shoulder right now, going, well, how do you ensure that this is safe? If the lights are dimming down or shutting off on, is it are there nuisance switching issues and stuff like that? Like the chatter that you hear when they hear like, oh well, you can save a lot of money if you switch your lighting off.
Well, good question. And so, I mean, first of all, we're talking about having the AI apply the ANSI
Hmm.
standard. So if you think that ANSI is correct, if you think that RP8 is
Mm.
correct, it's safe,
Right.
then. But let's say you have some specialty cases. Let's say a city has policies or preferences or things like that. That's
Hmm.
where you can manually put those lighting profile curves in to deal with
Mm.
the anomalies. That's scalable.
Hmm.
You can deal with anomalies scalably. When
Right.
you have to manage the entire system manually, that's not possible.
Right. Absolutely. And like to your point, you're dealing with thousands of different fixtures. You might be dealing with thousands of different sensors. And so you're not going to go and calibrate and just like deal with every single sensor manually to address the unique conditions of that particular location. So it does make sense to try to leverage that analytics and the power of AI to be able to really kind of manage that for people.
Yeah, I mean, the smart city doesn't happen without AI automation, and it doesn't
Interesting.
happen without lighting controls either, because that's where the powered platform is.
Hmm.
It's the least expensive, feasible, perfect place to platform all those outdoor sensors.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're almost out of time here, but I just want to kind of like encapsulate this because it's really fascinating to hear about this. I mean, like, you know, 5 years ago, stuff like this was kind of unheard of. So it's like, wow, like this is huge. So I mean, Tondo's a company that really has this platform of data and analytics as well as AI to kind of leverage the technology that also is being provided by Tondo, which provides smart dimming but also sensing technology throughout a city for the purposes of really providing a holistic smart city approach, which is really customized to the city's needs. It's not just cookie cutter, okay, everything gets the same thing. But what it's using existing or upgraded infrastructure to really facilitate that by incorporating into the lighting and becoming a lighting control platform. But additionally, because the fact that this platform originally was just for industrial IoT applications, it was not originally intended for lighting. It has this robust capability that expands past lighting, but also, you really it like talking about RP8 like that right there. Anybody who's in the lighting industry should be able to go, oh, they actually know what they're talking about. They've read at least a manual on lighting, which is much further down the road than a lot of other groups that come in and say, oh, we know lighting. But you have the background. You have the background and the understanding of what is required for good lighting. So it makes sense that you layer on top of that platform additional components. So, I think this is really fantastic stuff that you guys are providing here, and it's really exciting. And I definitely want to get you back on this show to talk more. I mean, there are some great projects that I've heard about that you guys are involved in that I'd love to kind of go through with everybody listening and find out, what's going on. But like all of this is really critical to that baseline that you're talking about, which is how do you save money? I mean, cities really are struggling to keep the lights on, literally. And so, the argument is there. And additionally, I'm guessing with this kind of metrics, you can give them an idea of what a return on investment would look like. How long until you've actually saved money and are now paying back from what you've originally invested in?
Exactly. And just a couple of comments on what you said before we wrap up. That
Yeah.
in terms of my, having come from IT and now in lighting for the last 2.5, 3 years, I've almost committed. You want to know the section for RP8? It's 6.10. Go look it up. That's where your adaptive lighting savings are going to come from. I've been up and down that document more times than I can count. I think is it 9.3
Which
has
is
a piece in there too. Um, but 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 yeah, it's in the standard. I can quote it verse and chapter.
I
Um,
I love that.
but
That is so nerdy, and I love it.
yeah, I started off in Nerdville, like when
Yeah.
how else is a 17-year-old going to jump into this stuff? It's because of the technology. But lighting is fascinating. It's fascinating
Mhm.
stuff. Having to learn all the photometric stuff and as best I can. Um, the the interesting projects, yeah, I'd love to talk more on another episode, particularly about our smart highway project in for
Mhm.
the National Highway Authority in Israel. That's a 5,500-mile project,
Wow.
205,000 poles. We're at 75,000 deployed so far. And we've done a couple of cool projects out of that I'd love to talk about,
Yeah.
including that flood control thing, but also the electricity theft and wire theft sensing that we do with the
Oh,
AI. Because
interesting.
yeah, being able to detect electricity theft and wire theft
Mhm.
as a spin-off from the lighting that we didn't expect, that's a cool project.
Absolutely, and again, I imagine a lot of city officials would want to know about that capability because that is a huge issue with municipalities where people will just tap right into the grid, and it's like, well, we can't
I,
control for that.
I I had no idea until I Googled wire theft from street poles and saw Tacoma and St. Paul and Los Angeles and
Yeah.
there's sections of LA that had 40% of their lights out
Oh
because
my
of
God.
wire theft. There's a city near me that spent $9 million ripping the copper out to put lower quality wire in place That's worked
Whoa.
out to $210 a light to fix that problem that way. We can do it for $10 a light.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I mean that right there. Regardless, Marissa, it was awesome having you on the show. This was a really great conversation. Thank you so much. And if people want to learn more about Tondo, tondo-iot.com, that's their website. They are a great resource. If you aren't convinced already, please check them out. They really have some fantastic resources and want to be involved in your next project. So just want to remind everybody that this episode is presented by the Lighting Controls Association and Light Fair. Hopefully we're going to see you at Light Fair next year, 2025. But also, this is financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com, where we've got all of our episodes and a whole bunch of other stuff. And again, check out our sponsor for this episode, Tondo, tondo-iot.com. We really appreciate the support for this podcast. We could not do this without our sponsors, so thank you so much, and really can't say enough great things about this product. But thank you so much for joining us, and Marissa, thank you again. This was really great.